it wouldn't be make-believe if you believed in me. Yes, it's only a canvas sky hanging over a muslin tree. But it wouldn't be make-believe if you believed in me. Without your love, it's a honky-tonk parade. Without your love, it's a melody played in a penny arcade. It's a Barnum and Bailey world, just as phony as it can be. But it wouldn't be make-believe if you believed in me.
Say it's only a paper moon sailing over a cardboard sea. But it wouldn't be make-believe if you believed in me. Yes, it's only a canvas sky hanging over a muslin tree. But it wouldn't be make-believe if you believed in me. Without your love,
it's a honky-tonk parade. Without your love,
it's a melody played in a penny arcade.
it's a Barnum and Bailey world, just as phony as it can be. But it wouldn't be make-believe if you believed in me. It's phony, it's plain to see how happy I would be if you believed in me.
Extraordinary. I mean, mind-blowing extraordinary. This is a close-up. We see the hills. We see just hints that something is not quite right in the sky. And when you scan it and simply turn up the gain, turn up the brightness, there, all over the sky, is a stunning set of geometry. Glass-like, semi-transparent, scattering geometry.
Our story begins in World War II during the fight against the German forces. Just after the invasion of Normandy, there had been a division of the army created by Commander and would-be President Eisenhower that was dedicated to psychological warfare, known as the Ghost Army. They were a team of artists that were joined together to spoof and distract the German army. They created phony rubber tanks and trucks, as well as phony tire tracks. They played phony recordings of tanks and trucks through state-of-the-art speakers at the time. They also ran covert operations by going into bars and cafes and then pretending that they worked for organizations that they actually didn't. They called this special effects. They created phony patches, uniforms, markings on trucks, and backstories, and then played the role just as someone would in a Hollywood film. Only the theater is war. There was also the practice of using propaganda radio. Writer and activist Jay Fikes details this practice in an interview with Jan Irving of Gnostic Media.
What I want to do is a sort of comparison here. But Bateson, he was in the Office of Strategic Services, the precursor to the CIA in Burma and in Thailand. Right. And then as this stuff that's coming out about Terence Mckenna, he was doing deep background in East Timor in the 70s. So they both have this sort of same type of background. Would you like to talk about that?
Yeah, what I've learned about that from reading the David Price essay that I was showing to the viewers a moment ago. Let me just quote from that, from page 380. Bateson, during World War II, was designing and carrying out what they called black propaganda, which we call disinformation. He was involved with a team that produced radio broadcasts from remote secret locations in Burma and Thailand. He worked also in China, India, and Ceylon. And what they did, this group of broadcasters or disinformers, was they would represent what supposedly was the position of the enemy, meaning the Japanese who were occupying Burma, and they'd mix in a certain amount of facts, but then they'd also put in the disinformation to make the enemy appear more negative than they actually were, kind of defamation. And let me quote this about Bateson, according to Maybe, this author who wrote it in 1987. Bateson helped to operate an Allied radio station that pretended to be an official Japanese station. It undermined Japanese propaganda by following the official Japanese line, but exaggerating it. So, I mean, this is classic wartime disinformation. And, you know, once you learn how to do it in that context, then you can do it anytime, anywhere. And this is why I think you and I both are upset about MKUltra, is we're using disinformation on our own citizens. So this is very disturbing.
And they were the center of a movement of alchemical reformation and revolution, of spiritual freedom, and to my mind, a very sort of psychedelic world. A rarefaction, a good alchemical word, a rarefaction of the human imprint on this planet, a spiritualization of humanity, and a new order of mind.
Many of the techniques and insights gained in the Second World War remained, and many new ones were invented. The CIA mind control program began in the early 1950s and was officially sanctioned in 1953. This program was known as MKUltra. Many believe that the hippie counterculture, which rose up nearly a decade later, was a contrived creation of this program. There is much evidence to support this claim. The CIA ran a covert program in which they would give unwitting people LSD. For example, CIA agents would hire hookers and rent rooms in flea-bag hotels. They'd bring their Johns back and offer them LSD-spiked drinks. The CIA agents would watch through the peepholes or two-way mirrors to get an insight on the human psyche and laugh as the John thought he was losing his mind. Many of the music idols of that period have ties back to the military establishment, including several members of the Grateful Dead and Jim Morrison's band The Doors. Frank Zappa grew up on the Edgewood Arsenal, where his father, Francis Zappa, was working as a chemical warfare specialist. This facility is often cited in MKUltra operations. Bob Weir and Mickey Hart of the Grateful Dead have ties to the secret society Bohemian Grove. and Jim Morrison's father, Admiral George Stephen Morrison, was involved with the Gulf of Tonkin incident, which had turned out to be a false flag event that was used to escalate the Vietnam War. The name The Doors itself comes from a book written by Aldous Huxley called The Doors of Perception. Huxley also wrote another book called Brave New World, in which a totalitarian government with a genetically hard-coded class structure rules over the world, not by force, but by drugs, and deluding the people's minds into loving their servitude. This book can both be seen as a warning and as a blueprint for a would-be future society.
You've even written about the use of drugs in this light.
Well, now, this is a very interesting subject. I mean, in this book that you mentioned, this book of mine, Brave New World, I postulated a substance called soma, which was a very versatile drug. It would make people feel happy in small doses. It would make them see visions in medium doses, and it would send them to sleep in large doses. Well, I don't think such a drug exists now, nor do I think it will ever exist, but we do have drugs which will do some of these things, and I think it's quite on the cards that we may have drugs which will profoundly change our mental states without doing us any harm. I mean, this is the pharmacological revolution which has taken place, that we have now powerful mind-changing drugs which, physiologically speaking, are almost costless. I mean, they are not like opium or like cocaine, which do change the state of mind, but leave terrible results physiologically and morally. Now, I think what is going to happen in the future is the dictators will find, as the old saying goes, that you can do everything with bayonets except sit on them. That if you want to preserve your power indefinitely, you have to get the consent of the ruled. And this they will do partly by drugs, as I foresaw in Brave New World, partly by these new techniques of propaganda. They will do it by bypassing the sort of rational side of man and appealing to his subconscious and his deeper emotions and his physiology even, and so making him actually love his slavery. I mean, I think this is the danger, that actually people may be in some ways happy under the new regime, but they will be happy in a situation where they oughtn't to be happy.
Huxley also had ties to the Echelon Institute, which was a front for the CIA. Terence Mckenna, another prominent figure in the hippie and psychedelic movements, also had ties to the Huxley family and the Echelon Institute. He wrote a book called Archaic Revival, in which he describes the coming of a new age. Joe Atwell and Jan Irving published a paper in May 2013 titled Manufacturing the Deadhead, a Project of Social Engineering, which puts forth the theory that the U.S. government had actually manufactured the psychedelic movement.
How exactly can a hallucinogen like LSD be used to control people? Apparently it has been used in mind control programs such as MKUltra, hasn't it?
Sure. Well, you know, it can actually be used in a number of different ways, such as using it for, you know, they were attempting it as a truth serum and to cause personality splitting or multiple personality syndrome, such as I've recently discussed with Dr. Colin Ross, who's an expert on MKUltra. But another thing that they use it for is to essentially, and it's a multi-pronged attack in this sense, it's to debase the thinking abilities of the young. So, you know, last year on your show, you know, you had me on and we discussed the trivium. Well, the trivium is a very important tool for people to be able to think clearly and critically and spot when somebody's trying to fool them. Well, you take a lot of kids through the compulsory education system where they're not taught any critical thinking and they're not provided logical fallacies or anything, and then you give them a drug and you tell them it's spiritual and you don't warn them of any of the negatives, that it's all just positive. And essentially you shroud it around New Age religious beliefs and this notion that's come up around quantum physics that there is no truth in the world, the truth is arbitrary, and it's essentially just a full-on attack on the intellect of these kids. And so, rather than focusing on things that they can verify and fact check, they'll say, well, there is no truth. I might as well not even bother. Let's just be positive. Let's positive think, this sort of thing. When that's, the general goal is to get people just not to look and just, to kill the messenger, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and I would add, just to give a short answer to Vinny's question, that if you want to see how it can be used, just look at Woodstock. That's just couldn't be clearer. You have, LSD being used and other hallucinogenics in a completely culturally debased environment. If you just look at what the mental activity of the participants was like, they were pretty much able to be led anywhere by anybody. They simply had lost, moral and intellectual perspective. And it isn't just the drugs; it's also the music. If you look at the paper we wrote, we show that all of the components that you could see, for example, in the Sunset Strip, which was one of the progenitor regions of what is called the archaic revival. All of these elements, the music idol, electronic music, psychedelic drugs, just go on and on. All of these elements had been slowly placed into culture by a very few people. A number of people had noticed this odd connection between the original music idols and military intelligence. And this is research that was done by a gentleman named Dave McGowan that I would hope people pay attention to, because he really shows very clearly that there was this connection. And so that was the question. And then one energetic research, Jan sitting with us, he actually found the primary documents. He actually found, these aren't circumstantial evidence. I mean, these are CIA internal documents that show that Wasson's entire trip to Mexico was a CIA MKUltra project. And so...
Sub-Project 58.
Sub-Project 58. And so at this point, the pattern that has been developed by a lot of other researchers who have been very worried about the connection between military intelligence, the CIA, and the counterculture that appeared in the 1960s, at this point, once Jan had made these discoveries, the evidence simply as a case, just as a case you could take to a court of law, became just overwhelming, in my opinion.
And it's hilarious because I don't know what it is, but having been on your podcast enough times and rambled about Freemasons, inevitably some loon will send a message or post something on my board that's like, are you a pawn of the New World Order, Duncan? It's like, I know I'm not a pawn of the New World Order, but it's funny to think, oh, wow, what that weirdo is doing to me, I'm doing to the government, it's all just this endless state of we'll never figure it out. You'll never figure out who's behind the whole thing. But it is funny how easily people will assemble idiotic bits of information, like that shit with Terence Mckenna being in the fucking CIA. Are you kidding me, man? Really? Terence McKenna, Mushroom McKenna, god of mushrooms. The CIA is like, let's use this guy as our spokesperson.
Well, there was a CIA guy going around helping with distribution of LSD.
Well, there's been, without a doubt, there's been a lot of CIA people that were in the psychedelic community. Undercover, the problem is that Jan's statements about McKenna have been dismissed by everyone who's listened to the recordings that has half a brain. he was joking. It was a sense of humor. He was talking about alien intelligence and the mushroom recruiting him as a spokesperson. That's what he was talking about.
I hadn't heard
and it. Jan's take on it is literal. Jan's take on it is that he recruited him for the FBI, which, look, I don't know. You don't know. But if you have to look at it as what is most likely, well, if that's your only piece of evidence, if I listen to that, most likely I would say that he's joking around. He's talking about the mushroom. But Jan is one of those weird dudes that has been like researching this shit forever.
Right. Did he say anything about Gordon Wasson?
He knows. Gordon Wasson was in the CIA.
Yeah, there was some connection with Gordon Wasson.
With the CIA.
Hey, if the CIA is hiring people to smoke DMT and talk about aliens, I will take that
I'm
job.
in.
I'll send you my resume. I'll fax my resume to you.
I think the CIA, like, SeaWorld, it's not 100% evil. There's probably a bunch of people there that are training dolphins that really love dolphins.
Right.
It doesn't stop the institution from being evil just because a few of the people that are involved in it.
What's interesting is these people all seem to be very adept at public relations, and Wasson obviously was trained by his close friend Edward Bernays, who is the father of propaganda. Terence McKenna admitted in an audio recording that he was a PR guy.
You mean, am I the alien ambassador, whether I like it or not? Well, I often, when asked this question, I've said, it beats honest work. I mean, my brother is a PhD in 3 subjects and works in hard science, and I don't think it's brought him immense happiness, not that he's despondent, but I was always kind of a slider, and certainly when I reached La Chirera in 1971, I had a price on my head by the FBI. I was running out of money. I was at the end of my rope. And then they recruited me and said, with a mouth like yours, there's a place for you in our organization. And, I've worked in deep background positions about which the less said, the better. And then, about 15 years ago, they shifted me into public relations, and I've been there to the present.
And of course, people don't get that a PR guy is a paid liar. And they'll say, well, Terence McKenna liked to tell stories, and he was recruited by the mushroom. But get this, folks, somebody who is in propaganda, who is in public relations, is a paid liar there to fool you. A bard, if you look it up even on Wikipedia, it says someone who is hired by the king to tell the king's story.
Right.
Terence McKenna went around all the time saying, I'm a bard.
Exactly. Well, we saw, the damage they did with tobacco, claiming it was non-addictive, and they knew all along it was highly addictive. This is a big part of PR, is to sell products. Now, in this case, with Wasson and Castaneda and First and Meyerhoff, they're not really selling products, but what they're doing is they're diverting attention away from a political movement that was occurring in the 60s, specifically with the anti-Vietnam War protests and the civil rights movement. They're diverting the attention away from that into this brave new world of psychedelics, that the pseudo world that they were creating for people with their so-called publications. And there was an attempt there to keep people from further examination of foreign policy issues, and specifically CIA involvement in all kinds of covert operations throughout the world. So this to me is the real motive behind much of the so-called publications on shamanism. And that's what people need to be aware of, is it is a PR campaign. It is definitely a public relations campaign.
The red herring for counterculture, as you called it earlier
it's
today.
A red herring for the counterculture. You give them a pseudo-reality, a separate reality, as Castaneda called it, that isn't real.
human beings are individuals, and individuals have autonomy, a certain amount of it at least, when it comes to their own thoughts. And when you listen to a guy like Terence McKenna, and you go, well, whose side do I take? The evil overlord that I fucking work for, that pays my bills and couldn't give two fucks about me? Or this psychedelic bard who might be on to about a million things that I've never even considered once, might be correct about this idea that he's preaching about psychedelic drugs being the very reason why human beings exist in the first place, and our lack of use of them today is one of the reasons why we're so disconnected from nature. Like we just shot into space and then we lost our cord that connects us. We lost whatever the connection was to how we got there.
This would never happen in an Aboriginal or traditional society. I wrote a book, I mean, this has to be the wrap-up because we're over time, but I wrote a book called The Archaic Revival. I signed it tonight for some of you. The idea there is that we have gone sick by following a path of untrammeled rationalism, male dominance, attention to the visible surface of things, practicality, bottom lineism. We have gone very, very sick. And the body politic, like any body, when it feels itself to be sick, it begins to produce antibodies or strategies for overcoming the condition of dis-ease. And the 20th century is an enormous effort at self-healing. Phenomena as diverse as surrealism, body piercing, psychedelic drug use, sexual permissiveness, jazz, experimental dance, rave culture, tattooing. The list is endless. What do all these things have in common? They represent various styles of rejection of linear values. The society is trying to cure itself by an archaic revival, by a reversion to archaic values. So when I see people manifesting sexual ambiguity, or scarifying themselves, or showing a lot of flesh, or dancing to syncopated music, or getting loaded, or violating ordinary canons of sexual behavior, I applaud all of this because it's an impulse to return to what is felt by the body, what is authentic, what is archaic. And when you tease apart these archaic impulses, at the very center of all these impulses is the desire to return to a world of magical empowerment of feeling. And at the center of that impulse is the shaman, stoned, intoxicated on plants, speaking with the spirit helpers, dancing in the moonlight, and vivifying and invoking a world of conscious living mystery. That's what the world is. The world is not an unsolved problem for scientists or sociologists. The world is a living mystery. Our birth, our death, our being in the moment, these are mysteries. They are doorways opening on to unimaginable vistas of self-exploration, empowerment, and hope for the human enterprise. And our culture has killed that, taken it away from us, made us consumers of shoddy products and shoddier ideals. We have to get away from that. And the way to get away from it is by a return to the authentic experience of the body. And that means sexually empowering ourselves, and it means getting loaded, exploring the mind as a tool for personal and social transformation. The hour is late. The clock is ticking. We will be judged very harshly if we fumble the ball. We are the inheritors of millions and millions of years of successfully lived lives and successful adaptations to changing conditions in the natural world. Now the challenge passes to us, the living, that the yet to be born may have a place to put their feet and a sky to walk under. And that's what the psychedelic experience is about, is caring for, empowering, and building a future that honors the past, honors the planet, and honors the power of the human imagination. There is nothing as powerful, as capable of transforming itself and the planet as the human imagination. Let's not sell it straight. Let's not whore ourselves to nitwit ideologies. Let's not give our control over to the least among us. Rather, claim your place in the sun and go forward into the light. The tools are there. The path is known. You simply have to turn your back on a culture that has gone sterile and dead and get with the program of a living world and a re-empowerment of the imagination. Thank you very, very much.
This spring, Dr. Werner von Braun, director of NASA's Marshall Space Center, said, "Early next year, we'll flight test the huge 3-stage Saturn V rocket, which will transport 3 Apollo astronauts to the moon." The Apollo Saturn is being developed initially for the manned lunar program. It represents the culmination of the growth in technology that will enable men to leave the planet Earth, travel through space some 238,000 miles, land on another heavenly body, and then return safely home. This amazing progress in space finds the American people less than well prepared to comprehend its social impact. Scientists maintain a dialogue with scientists, quite properly to be sure. But there remains a much-needed job of indoctrinating our public with the consequences of cosmic communication and the inevitable changes in our life, in our culture, our philosophies, our economy, our markets. Radical revisions in our total society.
Ladies and gentlemen, Neil Armstrong.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President, Mr. President, members of Congress, fellow astronauts, ladies and gentlemen. Wilbur Wright once noted that the only bird that could talk was the parrot, and he didn't fly very well. So I'll be brief. Today we have with us a group of students among America's best. To you we say, we have only completed a beginning. We leave you much that is undone. There are great ideas undiscovered, breakthroughs available to those who can remove one of truth's protective layers. There are places to go beyond belief. Those challenges are yours. In many fields, not the least of which is space, because there lies human destiny.
Back at MGM in Bournemouth, England, production on 2001 continues. International interest makes the publicity department a center where reports on the progress of 2001: A Space Odyssey are circulated throughout the world. The inherent news value of 2001: A Space Odyssey has attracted reporters, photographers, and newsmen from all over the world. They come to talk, to record, and to interview. Here, Keir DeLay talks to reporters about his role in the film.
The picture is being done in such a gigantic scope, both in terms of its subject, in terms of the sets being built. I understand that it has one of the largest art department collections in the history of motion pictures. The centrifuge is so realistic and so unusual. After a while, you begin to forget that you're an actor, and you begin to really feel like an astronaut. And in terms of working with Stanley Kubrick, who is surely one of the giants of our industry as far as direction is concerned, and I think even more importantly to me personally, the opportunity I have to play such a gigantic figure in our history, in our present history, because I think that an astronaut truly is one of the heroes of our times, just as Daniel Boone was in the early American history, and as Ulysses was in ancient history. Ulysses, by the way, would be the greatest analogy I could think of to this character, because I play the part of Captain Dave Bowman, who's the commander of this ship.
Nearby, another of the film stars, Gary Lockwood, goes through the long daily routine of being dressed in his astronaut spacesuit.
In 1967, Stanley Kubrick was in England filming his famous space opera, science fiction film 2001: A Space Odyssey. Rumor has it that Kubrick was approached by the military-industrial complex after filming Dr. Strangelove because of his great ability to reconstruct the interior of a B-52 bomber by only using magazine photos and memory. The military then offered him a deal to make 2001 and the fake moon landings. 2001: A Space Odyssey was actually a way of preparing the public to accept and believe the fake moon landings by creating a visual language of how space travel is supposed to look in the viewers' minds. Filmmaker Jay Weidner has documented this in great detail with his Kubrick's Odyssey films, as well as his involvement with the film Room 237. He explains that during the ape-man scenes in 2001, Kubrick had filmed this in a studio using a technique known as front screen projection. You can clearly see where the set ends and the projection on the Scotchlight screen begins by turning up the gain and the contrast on the film using video editing software.
It is this fingerprint that reveals not only that NASA faked the Apollo missions, but how they faked them. Let's examine a few NASA Apollo images now. This is a still from Apollo 17. This is also a great example of the front screen projection process. Again, I have photoshopped a line indicating the back of the set. One can see that there is a slight uprising behind the rover, which is hiding the bottom of the screen. Also notice that even though everything is in focus, from the lunar rover to the mountains in the background, there is a strange change in the landscape of the ground right behind my lines. This is because the photo of the mountains being used on the front projection system has a slightly different ground texture than the set. As we go on, we will see that this fingerprint is also consistent throughout the Apollo images. Here's another Apollo image. Now here is my version where I show the line between the set and the screen. Again, notice the texture of the ground changes right behind my line. Now let's go to some more Apollo images. We can see that the same thing occurs here as in the 8-man scenes in 2001. There is always a line separating the set from the screen. Even if you do not see it at first, it will become apparent as one grows more familiar with the front screen projection process and how it is being used to fake the astronauts standing on the lunar surface. Go to any NASA site like www.apolloarchive.com and start looking for yourself. Not all lunar surface shots are using the process. Sometimes the astronauts are just standing on the set with a completely and suspicious black background. The early missions, Apollo 11 and 12, used the front screen projection system only when they had to. But as the missions went on and they had to look better, Kubrick began to perfect the process. Although you can see the front screen projection process on every mission, the seriously revealing images are in the later missions, particularly Apollo 14, 15, 16, and, my favorite, 17. Here are a few from Apollo 17. The astronaut is driving the lunar rover parallel to the screen, and the rover is only 3 or 4 feet away from the scotchlight. Please note how the tire treads just lead to nowhere. Actually, they are going to the edge of the set. In this one, the astronaut is about 6 feet in front of the scotchlight screen. Please note how everything is in focus, from the rocks and pebbles close to the camera all the way to the crystal clear mountain behind the astronaut. As we shall see, even that is impossible. Also, please note the other telltale evidence that permeates the Apollo images. There is a stark difference in the ground texture between the set and what is being projected onto the screen. You can almost count the number of small rocks, and the granularity of the ground is clearly seen on the set. But once we get to the screen on the other side of my line, this granularity disappears. This next image is a slick little piece of work. When first viewed, one is sure that they are looking across the vast, unbroken lunar surface from beginning to end. With the Earth rising, it is truly a stunning shot. But sure enough, close examination reveals the set screen line once again. Again, please note the change in the texture of the ground immediately on each side of the line. The little pebbles and dust just seem to disappear behind my line.
He also points out that former NASA consultant Richard Hoagland had done something similar to the moon landing photographs to what Widener had done to the 2001 footage by raising the gain and the lighting on the photo.
Mind-blowing extraordinary. This is a close-up. We see the hills. We see just hints that something is not quite right in the sky. And when you scan it and simply turn up the gain, turn up the brightness, there, all over the sky, is a stunning set of geometry. Glass-like, semi-transparent, scattering geometry, scattering blue light, which tells us that it must be fine particles, fine stuff, very micron size, with various imperfections, holes, sparkles, the whole 9 yards. This is what Ken caught them painting out in the LRL, because everyone knows you can't see stars from the moon. The bright things were not stars. They were shining bits of glass scattering sunlight, recorded by these primitive, by today's standards, Hasselblad cameras on 35mm Ektachrome film.
What he believed to be seeing were giant glass structures on the moon's surface, and there was a massive government cover-up going on in this regard. Widener suggests that what he's actually looking at is the studio wall that the moon landings were faked in.
Pitch black. That again is why they were painting it out. This all fits together awfully, awfully well, and I use the term awfully with full knowledge. If you look carefully at this section, you'll see now that there is a stunning 3-dimensional girder-like geometry, a scaffolding, rebar, a structural matrix standing above the moon, anchored to the surface by a set of slanted buttresses. The geometry is perfect, meaning it absolutely is consistent with what constructional techniques would be there if you had built something miles high above the current surface tale. This again is, to me, stunning, amazing, stunning quality, because we had not had access to anything approaching this low generation from the Apollo negative.
Widener also suggests that 2001: A Space Odyssey is an allegory representing the 4 stages of the Cabal found in Gnostic Christianity. The ape scenes represent the kingdom of man, the monolith found on the moon represents the foundation, Jupiter represents the sun or beauty, and the ending represents enlightenment. Where it gets murky is the explanation about Jupiter. Widener explains that originally they were going to call the 3rd segment Saturn and the Beyond, but they couldn't make the rings realistic enough, so this was switched to Jupiter. This is important because Saturn can represent the sun of the Kabbalic religions. Stanley Kubrick has a reputation for being a perfectionist with his films. Is this actually a veiled admission from Stanley Kubrick that something isn't quite right? Widener also asserts that NASA has actually gone to the moon, but what we were shown was faked. But why would they do that? Perhaps there are several reasons. Widener suggests we didn't want to show our hands to the Russians at that time. Perhaps that in the short term, it could serve as a good distraction for the Vietnam War opposition. In the long term, it could serve as a good study on the psychology of the masses, to show the world an event that everyone would watch in an almost ritualistic fashion. Perhaps this is a way of altering the mass consciousness to make the majority of people believe in a pseudo-reality, to suspend that moment of disbelief on a mass level and make them believe something that isn't real. I mean, think of the military applications.
It is the year 2001. You are on your way to a space station on routine business. You have been traveling less than an hour and have remembered to call your office. Now you transmit your thoughts across space electronically. You receive your answer transmitted directly to the built-in television screen in your case. This is but one example of what life will be like in the year 2001.
Good afternoon. Thank you for coming. Today it is my honor to announce that I'm submitting the name of Donald Rumsfeld to be Secretary of Defense.
I look forward to serving our country again.
Rumsfeld had been Secretary of Defense before under Gerald Ford. Then, the enemy we were supposed to fear was the Soviet Union.
I'm not saying with certainty that the Russians are coming. I'm saying the trends are here. I'm not saying the Russians are 10 feet tall. I'm saying they used to be 5'3". They're now 9.5, and they're growing.
Now there was a new enemy closer to home. On September the 10th, 2001, Rumsfeld made a speech laying out his plans to privatize much of the US military. Milton Friedman would have been proud. He said, "The topic today is an adversary that poses a threat, a serious threat to the security of the United States of America. This adversary is one of the world's last bastions of central planning. It governs by dictating 5-year plans. Perhaps this adversary sounds like the former Soviet Union, but that enemy is gone. This adversary is closer to home. It's the Pentagon bureaucracy. Today, we declare war on bureaucracy." The next day, American Airlines Flight 77 crashed into the Pentagon, killing 184 people.
2 suspects are in FBI custody after a truckload of explosives was discovered around the George Washington Bridge. That bridge links New York to New Jersey over the Hudson River. Whether the discovery of those explosives had anything to do with other events of the day is unclear, but the FBI has 2 suspects in hand, said the truck load of explosives, enough explosives were in the truck to do great damage to the George Washington Bridge.
20 seconds and counting. T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal. 12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence starts. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11. Tower cleared.
We got a roll program. Neil Armstrong reporting the roll and pitch program, which puts Apollo 11 on a proper heading. Plus 30 seconds. Roll complete and a pitch program.
If you've seen many of the managed demolitions where they implode a building and they cause it essentially to fall vertically because they cause all of the vertical columns to fail simultaneously, that's exactly what it looked like, and that's what happened.
It was live on television. I mean, just literally millions of people.
The entire building has just collapsed, as if a demolition team set off. When you see the old demolitions of these old buildings, it's folded down on itself, and it is not...
10 o'clock Eastern Time this morning, just collapsing on itself. This is a place where thousands of people work. We have no idea what caused this. If you wish to bring anybody who's ever watched a building being demolished on purpose knows that if you're going to do this, you have to get at the under infrastructure of a building and bring it down.
I tried to leave the building, but as soon as I got outside, I heard a second explosion and another rumble and more smoke and more dust. I ran inside the buildings, the chandeliers shook, and again, black smoke filled the air. Within another 5 minutes, we were covered again with more silt and more dust. And then a fire marshal came in and said we had to leave because if there was a third explosion, this building might not last.
As we were getting our gear on and making our way to the stairway, there was a heavy-duty explosion.
Some of the people out, then there was those secondary explosions, and then the subsequent collapses. So I don't know how many people were there. I know there was a lot of firefighters.
New York's bravest never had a chance.
We really never even got to close that close to the building. The explosion blew and it knocked everybody over.
The FBI is here, as you can see. They had roped this area off. They were taking photographs and securing this area just prior to that huge explosion that we all heard and felt.
Most of the victims so far were people outside the blown-up buildings.
Like, it sounded like gunfire, you know, bang, 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 and then all of a sudden, 3 big explosions.
To me, it sounded like an explosion. Then the building, the rolling sound sounded like the building collapsed. The floors collapsed down. I saw it blow, and then ran like hell. Thank God. 69, but I can still run.
It just went ba-boom. It was like a bomb went off. And it was like holy hell coming down them stairs. And then when we finally got to the bottom, they were coming out on the mezzanine level there, and then another explosion came right from it, because everyone went flying. Just saw that as well. The second tower, the only one that was standing, tower number 1, just we saw some kind of explosion, a lot of smoke come out at the top of the tower, and then it collapsed down onto the street.
Next thing we know, it was boom, and the floor started shaking.
And then we saw debris fall down, and next thing we know, we had to get out of the building. We stuck on the stairs for a while. We finally got down to the lobby. Then we get to the lobby, it was this big explosion.
Well, me and Mr. Hess, the corporation counsel, were on the 25th floor. I told him we got to get out of here. We started walking down the stairs and made it to the 8th floor. Big explosion. Blew us back into the 8th floor.
I was making my way to the foot of the World Trade Center. Suddenly, while talking to an officer who was questioning me about my press credentials, we heard a very loud blast, an explosion. We looked up, and the building literally began to collapse.
Rose Housey, one of our CNN producers, is on the phone. Rose, what do you got?
I'm about a block away, and there were several people that were hanging out the windows right below where the plane crashed, when suddenly you saw the top of the building start to shake, and people began leaping from the windows in the north side of the building. You saw 2 people at first plummet, and then a third one, and then the entire top of the building just blew up, and splinters of debris are falling on the street.
When I tried to save people, the moment we heard a big explosion coming down, everything just went black. Everything came down, glass started popping, and people got hurt, stuff went on top of them, and it was a big explosion, and everything got dark, real dark, like snow. You can see behind me, oh, this is not snow, this is all from the building. It was a terrible nightmare.
Because I was down in the basement, all of a sudden we heard a loud bang, and the elevator doors blew open, some guy was burnt up, so I dragged him out, his skin was all hanging off.
The streets of the financial district covered with debris, in some cases ankle deep. Cars on fire, cars just turned by the force of the explosion. It was like something no one had ever seen.
This huge, incredible force of wind and debris actually came up the stairs, knocked my helmet off, knocked me to the ground.
I was about 5 blocks away when I heard explosions, 3 thuds, and turned around to see the building we just got out of, antenna tip over and fall in on itself.
We started running. Floor by floor, started popping out.
It was if they had detonated.
Yeah,
detonated. They were planned to take down a building. Boom, 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 boom.
I go downstairs. The foreman tells me to go to remove the containers. As I'm walking by the main freight car of the building in the corridor, that's when I got blown. I mean, the impact of the explosion, of whatever happened, it threw me to the floor, and that's when everything started happening.
You have 2 110-story office buildings. You don't find a desk. You don't find a chair. You don't find a telephone, a computer. The biggest piece of a telephone I found was half of the keypad, and it was about this big.
Has such low credibility that I don't really think it's serious. I should say that, I'm pretty isolated on this in the West. I mean, a large part of the left completely disagrees on this and has all kind of elaborate conspiracy theories and about how it happened and why it happened and so on. But I think it just first of all, I think it's completely wrong, but also I think it's diverting people away from serious issues. I mean, it just doesn't make any, even if we're true, which is extremely unlikely, who cares? I mean, it doesn't have any significance. But it's a little bit like the huge energy that's put out on trying to figure out who killed John F. Kennedy. I mean, who knows? And who cares? I mean, plenty of people get killed all the time. Why does it matter that one of them happened to be John F. Kennedy? If there was some reason to believe that there was a high-level conspiracy, it might be interesting. But the evidence against that is just overwhelming.
On the morning of September 11, 2001, 19 men armed with box cutters, directed by a man on dialysis in a cave fortress halfway around the world, using a satellite phone and a laptop, directed the most sophisticated penetration of the most heavily defended airspace in the world, overpowering the passengers and the military combat-trained pilots on 4 commercial aircraft before flying those planes wildly off course for over an hour without being molested by a single fighter interceptor. These 19 hijackers, devout religious fundamentalists who like to drink alcohol, snort cocaine, and live with pink-haired strippers, managed to knock down 3 buildings with 2 planes in New York. While in Washington, a pilot who couldn't handle a single-engine Cessna was able to fly a 757 in an 8,000-foot descending 270-degree corkscrew turn to come exactly level with the ground. hitting the Pentagon and the Budget Analyst Office, where DoD staffers were working on the mystery of the $2.3 trillion that Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld had announced missing from the Pentagon's coffers in a press conference the day before, on September 10th, 2001. Luckily, the news anchors knew who did it within minutes.
Osama bin Laden.
The pundits knew within hours.
Osama bin Laden.
The administration knew within the day.
Terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbored them.
And the evidence literally fell into the FBI's lap.
That a hijacker's passport was found blocks from the World Trade Center crash site, if you can believe that.
But for some reason, a bunch of crazy conspiracy theorists demanded an investigation into the greatest attack on American soil in history. That investigation was delayed, underfunded, set up to fail, a conflict of interest, and a cover-up from start to finish. It was based on testimony extracted through torture, the records of which were destroyed. It failed to mention the existence of WTC-7, Able Danger, P-TECH, Sibel Edmonds, OBL and the CIA, and the drills of hijacked aircraft being flown into buildings that were being simulated at the precise same time that those events were actually happening. It was lied to by the Pentagon, the CIA, the Bush administration, and as for Bush and Cheney, well, no one knows what they told it because they testified in secret, off the record, not under oath, and behind closed doors. It didn't bother to look at who funded the attacks because that question is ultimately of little practical significance. Still, the 9/11 Commission did brilliantly, answering all of the questions the public had, except most of the victims' family members' questions, and pinned blame on all the people responsible, although no one so much as lost their job, determining the attacks were
failure of imagination.
Because
nobody in our government, at least, and I don't think the prior government that could envision flying airplanes into buildings.
Except the Pentagon, FEMA, NORAD, and the NRO. The DIA destroyed 2.5 terabytes of data on Able Danger, but that's okay because it probably wasn't important. The SEC destroyed their records on the investigation into the insider trading before the attacks, but that's okay because destroying the records of the largest investigation in SEC history is just part of routine record keeping. NIST has classified the data that they used for their model of WTC-7's collapse, but that's okay because knowing how they made their model of the collapse would jeopardize public safety. The FBI has argued that all material related to their investigation of 9/11 should be kept secret from the public, but that's okay because the FBI probably has nothing to hide. This man never existed, nor is anything he had to say worthy of your attention, and if you say otherwise, you are a paranoid conspiracy theorist and deserve to be shunned by all of humanity. Likewise him, and her. And her, and her, and him. Osama bin Laden lived in a cave fortress in the hills of Afghanistan, but somehow got away. Then he was hiding out in Tora Bora, but somehow got away. Then he lived in Abbottabad for years, taunting the most comprehensive intelligence dragnet employing the most sophisticated technology in the history of the world for a decade, releasing video after video with complete impunity and getting younger and younger as he did so, before finally being found in a daring SEAL team raid which wasn't recorded on video, in which he didn't resist or use his wife as a human shield, and in which these crack special forces operatives panicked and killed this unarmed man, supposedly the best source of intelligence about those dastardly terrorists on the entire planet. Then they dumped his body in the ocean before telling anyone about it. Then a couple dozen of that team's members died in a helicopter crash in Afghanistan. This is the story of 9/11, brought to you by the media which told you the hard truths about
his head could be seen to move violently forward.
And
they took the babies out of the incubators.
And mobile production facilities.
And
the rescue of Jessica Lynch.
If you have any questions about this story, you are a batshit, paranoid, tinfoil, dog-abusing baby hater and will be reviled by everyone. If you love your country and or freedom, happiness, rainbows, rock and roll, puppy dogs, apple pie, and your grandma, you will never ever express doubts about any part of this story to anyone. Ever. This has been a public service announcement by the Friends of the FBI, CIA, NSA, DIA, SEC, MSM, White House, NIST, and the 9/11 Commission. Because ignorance is strength.
Think of all they miss.
You're probably right. Now, ladies, where exactly are we going? Exactly.
Where the rainbow ends.
Where the rainbow ends.
Don't you want to go where the rainbow ends?
Well, now that depends where that is.
Well, let's find out.
Excuse me.
Hoagland even shows us that there are rainbow lights reflecting in the sky high above the astronauts. Many people, especially in NASA, have attacked Hoagland for these interpretations. Yet no matter how much they attack Hoagland, They can never explain what it is that he's finding on these Apollo images.
To make Americans aware of our space progress, the motion picture medium and the national magazine medium can complement each other's most effective educational techniques. The motion picture, long known for its ability to educate while entertaining, should be used in combination with the magazine and its greater facility for serious discussion in depth. Look proposes a special advertising section to be published in its first 1967 issue, devoted to the social impact of celestial exploration. This will be timed to ride the crest of MGM's multi-million-dollar promotion program. The Look section and its advertisers will be direct beneficiaries. This will afford you as an advertiser a unique publishing vehicle for projecting your corporate future plans. Your message will appear against an educational backdrop, revealing how all segments of American industry are anticipating the opportunities and the need of tomorrow's world, offering the public the information needed to make an affirmative judgment on the great national investment required to continue this progress.
I remember you mentioning specifically talking about gaslighting in terms of art and the way that art, modern art, and the sort of twisted nature of the aesthetics that are increasingly being held up as and venerated is in effect a way of trying to twist our own sensibilities. I was wondering if you could just address that quickly as well before we go.
Well, we spoke last time about this, is that what happens is basically, since I've been a kid and since you've been a kid, and probably when our parents were kids, modern galleries have been filled with what basically are conceptual works that don't relate in any aesthetic form to what we would consider to be beautiful. That's okay. I have no problem with that. I have no problem with art being used to challenge. No problem at all. The thing is that other forms of expression are not being allowed in the galleries. So the galleries are filled with cardboard boxes in the corner of a room, or, this kind of nonsense, or a few pebbles in the corner, a pile of garbage in the side of a big gallery space. I saw one recently that, on so many levels it was so deep. It was a video installation in a local art gallery here, a very, very beautiful modern building that was bought with, large amounts of taxpayers' money. And all the installation was what these art colleges produce now, video installations. And it was just a guy's on this, on a TV screen, a large flat screen, just being filmed. And he was saying things like 24, lemon, oranges, and then long pauses. And it was supposed to mean something deep. I went back an hour later and the video installation had broken down. There's a little paper sign on it said, installation has been closed for technical reasons. And it's the absurdity of modern art and what they call modern art was shown in that one scene. The sign saying installation is cancelled due to technical reasons because the monitor broke down and the DVD player broke down is precisely as artistic as the ridiculous monitor on the screen with this guy saying nothing. What they're doing is they're changing our perception of reality. In my last book, The Anvil of the Psyche, I talk about them and I call them the merchants of nonsense. And if they're changing our perception of reality, then we have to say to ourselves, to what means? Well, I'll tell you what it is. If we go into the art galleries and all we're met with is absurdity and blandness, it's going to make advertising on the billboards on the streets and on TV look very beautiful, very colorful, and very seductive. The same thing with political posters. I've noticed that too as well. Political posters, if you look at them, and you can't just put it down to printing technology. In the last 10 years, they're almost psychedelic in terms of the amount of colors and images they put in them. They hire top graphic designers to create beautiful posters. The same with the magazines. Magazines are crammed with information, all these silly magazines on celebrities that fill our newsstands. They're almost like an array of candy. It's almost psychedelic, which what you see in the public art galleries is dead, bland, and flat. And that's the reason why. They don't want us knowing what real true beauty is because they can't create it. As I said, psychopaths cannot create. They can be devious. And what they do is they will alter reality. So you'll never actually get beauty and sort of a spiritual, psychic, uplifting experience from any situation or any kind of environment or structure created by the psychopaths. But what they can do is they can make the stuff that's truly beautiful, truly spiritually uplifting, and truly insightful, and they can actually wreck it, distort it, and make it seem about as interesting as an empty cardboard box blowing down the street. And then what they present, their version of reality, will be delivered with a Mardi Gras style, colorful presentation that will actually be used to seduce people. And if that isn't an example of gaslighting, I don't know what is.
But at any rate, if we do want to look at this more on the broader scale and what it could potentially mean, I think what we are on the brink of, I think there's no doubt about it, that we are on the brink of the collapse of a bubble that has been intentionally blown. And we've been in a lot of bubbles in the last several years, but one of the largest in human history has been this blowing of the bond bubble since the Lehman collapse in 2008, where through the quantitative easing programs and all of the various iterations of that across the Bank of England and the Bank of Japan and the European Central Bank and the Federal Reserve and all of these different banks pumping all of this liquidity into the system by buying up their own bonds. As one Bank of England official admitted last year, they have deliberately blown the biggest bond bubble in history. And for those who want a spoiler on that story, it doesn't end with a happy ending. So we are on the cusp of this collapse, and I think obviously the human tragedy that plays out during these collapses should not be undersold or underestimated, and this may be the beginning of, or the thin edge of the wedge of that collapse, and I certainly don't revel in that in any way, shape, or form. It's a tragic thing, but I think that we're also on the cusp of another bubble collapsing, and that's the bubble of unreality that we've been living in. I think the bond bubble and all of these other financial bubbles are really just symptomatic of the fundamental underlying principle that we are living in a time of just complete 100% fabrication. We are fed just constant lies totally by the media. And just as one example of that, I mean, the Federal Reserve cut back on their tapering last week with another $10 billion of tapering to the quantitative easing. So now they're only pumping in $65 billion a month into the economy through their quantitative easing program, because apparently the cumulative effect of unemployment shrinking over the past year has been enough for them to say, we can ease off the gas pedal a little bit now. So they're now cutting back on their quantitative easing program. But that unemployment figure itself is complete total fabrication. As we've gone through it before on this program, as I'm sure a lot of the listeners out there know, the unemployment figures are basically made up government figures, and they can tinker with those numbers any way they want. Because even though we are apparently at 6.7% unemployment, of course we are now at 35-year highs of or lows of labor participation. People who are actually employed in the workforce are at 35-year lows. That is a stunning statistic that is not being reflected in this so-called reality we're living in. And I think there are all sorts of examples of this unreality. And I think that's another type of bubble that's been blown, that just the incredible lies that just keep getting bigger and bigger as we move further and further along into this never land they're creating around us. And when that bubble bursts, well, it's anyone's guess what will happen. But I think we're going to see some really stunning changes to society and to the way that things have been going along. The status quo has been ticking along, the likes of which most people probably haven't seen in their entire lifetime.
Johnny, get your gun, get your gun, get your gun. Take it on the run, on the run, on the run. Hear them calling you and me, every son of liberty. Hurry right away, no delay, go today. Make your daddy glad to have had such a lad. Tell your sweetheart not to pine, to be proud her boys in line. Over there, over there, over there, over there. Send the word over there. That the Yanks are coming, the Yanks are coming. The drum coming everywhere. So prepare, say a prayer. Send the word to beware. We'll be all coming over, and we won't come back till it's over there. Johnny, get your gun, get your gun, get your gun. Johnny, show the Hun you're a son of a gun. Hoist the flag and let her fly. Yankee do or die. Pack your little kids, do your grit, do your bit. Yankees to the ranks, from the towns and the tanks. Make your mother proud of you, and the old red, white, and blue. Over there, send the word over there. That the Yanks are coming, the Yanks are coming. The drum coming everywhere. So prepare, say a prayer. Send the word to beware. We'll be over, we're coming over, and we won't come back